Not only is he from another dimension, but he's also in another color. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman from Zur-En-Arrh Black Light Edition. Some time ago, Bruce Wayne took part in an isolation experiment overseen by Dr. Simon Hurt, in which the psychiatrist gave Bruce the post-hypnotic phrase Zur-En-Arrh. When heard by Bruce years later, the trigger phrase shatters his mind and leaves him wandering Gotham City in a daze. Always ready with a backup plan, though, Batman has previously developed a persona within himself, a Batman without Bruce Wayne, and stitches together a new batsuit, calling himself Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. While Batman has found he has no need for an alter ego, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the Batman Zur-En-Arrh Black Light Edition figure is. This is a simple recasting in a slightly different color of plastic from the earlier looked at Batman Zur-En-Arrh. Don't worry, we'll bring that figure in a second. First, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did come through and provide this sample of the Black Light Edition Batman Zur-En-Arrh that we can have a look at this review. This is a 2023, by the way, Entertainment Earth exclusive, very limited to 3,010 pieces. The tape measure, though, tells us that Batman from Zur-En-Arrh stands about 7¼ inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 18½ centimeters tall. Comparing the differently colored Caped Crusader with the earlier looked at Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, once again using still the same mold, sure, but the original Batman Zur-En-Arrh definitely had a much darker red, a definitely different approach to yellow, and a much more darker purple. It looks to be, again, like they're using the same molds, which is fine and good. I love still the original body and build of the Batman Zur-En-Arrh. Still wish that actually this head sculpt could find another light of day, maybe used for another Batman figure. Another comparison, speaking of another Batman figure, here's also what it looks like with the Batman from Nightfall. And to free up a little bit of space, sliding over the original Zur-En-Arrh Batman to bring in yet another Black Light Edition. This was the Black Light Edition Infinite Frontier Scarecrow. If you are familiar with the things that came included with the Black Light Edition Scarecrow, you'll automatically be familiar then with the things that come included with the Black Light Edition of Batman from Zur-En-Arrh. First, the figure, while not coming included with the Scarecrow, does come included with his own unique trading card. States down below that this is Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, states also that this is the Black Light Edition. Flipped around to the back, though, you're not going to get a read-up this time around, but rather instead a certificate of authenticity telling us also as well that it's a limited run of 3,010 pieces. The one provided here happens to be P7. Normally, though, you'd get a numbered sequence out of that 3,010. To go along with this card, you also get yourself a little standee. The standee is one that we've always got before when it comes to more of these higher-end figures. And it's also the ones that came also included with the movie Maniac figures. And that's just a case of taking the card from Batman of Zur-En-Arrh and sliding it at the top. You got yourself a nice little display way of displaying the card. The figure also, like I said, comes included with this contraption setup. It's a light source that allows black light to shine down basically in two different places on the figure itself. It consists of parts. First of all, you get yourself a much large display stand. The same one that we in fact got included with the Scarecrow. It does have one peg to the side that can plug into either one of Batman's boots. You only have one to choose from. And then on the bottom of it, there's also two plugs, two peg holes on either side. You get also these little clamp pieces. I may have made this mistake when we looked at the Scarecrow. I won't make this same mistake again. If you look at the bottom of these, actually, it lists B. If you look at the bottom, though, of the display stand, it lists a B right there. On this side, it actually lists as A. So when you're putting these in place, even though they do have the means to plug in place, you really want to make sure that you're plugging B to B, A to A, so everything lines up appropriately. See how there's these sunken in grooves? Everything should be lined up, that the sunken grooves will then fit and sit flush with the little holding clips that will be on the side to hold the supporting rods. Then take, of course, the A, matching up, where's the A right there? A and A. Take the two, snap them together. Now you got yourself a display stand. The reasoning why I make this correcting point is I think when we looked at the Scarecrow, I had maybe put them in the wrong place, and I had even commented, I think, that in the standee, it wasn't sitting completely flush. If you are matching up the letters as you should, then it should sit a lot flatter than probably what was the case when we looked at the Scarecrow. With that in place, you also get yourself these metal poles. The poles, picking back up the display stand, I don't even know why I put it back down. There's holes on the side. You're going to take the metal posts, plug them in place. That's on one side. And it'll do the exact same thing here on this side. Get it all the way in there. And then you get this set up. You also get yourself a couple of lamps, little lanterns here that shine down. It's basically permitting or projecting a black light. They do require button cell batteries. Those are the ones that have already been installed. One thing I did, though, notice is with Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, his didn't have ones included. Now, I don't know if it was just the case that this is a P7, so it's a media or press proof. It wasn't going to be part of the original sequence of the 3010. Maybe that was the reasoning why this one didn't actually have batteries. Scarecrow had batteries, so I ended up taking and pillaging the batteries from Scarecrow. I first thought to myself, well, maybe they're using the exact same lamps. And actually they were. So while I did change the batteries over just to make sure that the colors were exactly the same, because of course I wouldn't want to have Batman from Zur-En-Arrh using the ones from Scarecrow if they were projecting a completely different black light. And obviously it wasn't the case because black light's going to be shining the exact same. So these actually do have button cell batteries. They plug in place here. You basically would have unscrewed the compartment here, put the button cell batteries in, and then these clamp on the side. See these little open clips here? These basically clamp on either side of the post. The thing about the post, though, is if you have the lamp shining straight like this, it's really hard to kind of access the light source because the on and off switch is right here to turn on and off the lantern. I keep calling these lanterns. Basically, you want to make sure that when you are putting this in place, you're putting them in at least a place where you can still access the light source. These, though, by the way, just turn it off for right now at least, you're going to plug it onto the side. So basically, you're going to take this clip, you're going to clip it onto the post. That makes sense? Hope it makes sense. You're going to plug that in on one side, spin around the other side, and if hopefully then you guys can see, you're going to take the other one and clip it in place also as well. Now, not only can you clip it in place, you can also decide where you want to have it on the post. So if you want to have it a little bit higher up, you can do that. You can also slide it down also as well. And of course, these can angle up and down. Angle them ever so often does result in these actually coming loose from the actual post. But then again, you've got yourself a little studio platform. You can really have the figure facing, so you can have it facing this way and put the figure basically down. I know we're kind of covering up the rest of Batman's accessories. You can have it covering like this. The only problem is, of course, the light source is going to be shining this way. So it's basically only going to be shining, say, the sides of his shoulders and the back of his cape. That's not going to be good for anyone. Rather, though, instead, take the figure, spin this around, just move all the other accessories out of the way for right now. Spin this around, and you really want to put ideally Batman facing with the lamps facing him. So the spotlights are basically shining against the figure. I will, of course, turn these guys on so you guys can see what they actually look like. They're not as brightly illuminated as maybe you would hope. So we'll just again switch these on. It's sometimes a little harder depending on what angle you have these to actually turn on and off the switch. Again, we'll just turn it on this side as well. And again, really, it's kind of hard to make this out in the brightness of the studio here. I might actually just cut the lights in a second so you guys can actually see how this guy illuminates. But again, it's only going to cover certain areas of the figure, kind of right around here, right around here. Okay, maybe we'll just cut the lights. You guys can see exactly what I mean. And a quick cut later, you can see how everything looks illuminated with the lights fully turned off. Again, it does a better job, obviously, in the dark, where you get the full chance and full experience to kind of see how Batman from Zur-En-Arrh illuminates. It only, again, illuminates kind of around on the sides here of the torso, not as much really on the lower legs, certainly not as much for the head, but again, you can always move these lamps around, spotlighting in different sections of the figure if you prefer. Welcome back to brightness. Let's go ahead and take Batman off his display stand, and we'll just kind of move the display stand off to the side. I've remembered, of course, to make sure I turned off the spotlights. I also got myself a black light here so you guys can actually see as well that the illumination for Batman works just as well if you have yourself a little small black light. That's also allowing me the chance to give you guys a closer up inspection of just how well that illuminates on the figure. I'll also be bringing back in the earlier Batman Zur-En-Arrh so you guys can see as well the differences between the two. I'm sure it's pretty much a night and day difference. Although the colors really on this one, it's just basically the same colors, just turned up a lot more. It's as if this figure was basically colored with highlighters rather than just the darker colors that we got from before. Speaking of also figures from before, the figure also comes included with what seems to be the exact same accessories, colored in a much brighter orange this time around. Something that would make Negan very jealous. He gets himself, for example, a bat that has nails on the end of it. Unfortunately, though, by coloring it all the same color of orange, it loses the effect of really what is exactly embedded into the wood itself. It plugs into his hand, although I did notice with the hands lately on these McFarlane figures that they seem to be using a harder plastic. So I had a real harder time, in fact, to try to get these actually to hold the weapons better. I ended up heating the hand initially in hot water, and then once you know, of course, by the time that I hit record, the plastic has now since cooled. But we're going to go ahead and do our best to kind of get this in his hand. Honestly, if anything, the problem is usually just the thumbs. Once you get it really around the thumbs, the figure holds the bat fine. Again, he has the bat, and he also does have the knife. I'll get to the knife more in a second. I think the plastic may have even cooled too much. We'll have to kind of go back and heat that hand again before we jump to final looks. Take my word for it, though, the figure does have the means to hold the weapons with both his hands. Speaking of his weapons, seeing as it's plural and all, the figure also comes included with a knife. The knife cast basically in a very bland-looking gray, a much more brighter color of orange for the handle. But again, with all of these, the colors are pretty much just jacked up, brightened a lot brighter than the original figure's accessories. Moving Batman over, once again, we'll bring back in Batman from Zur-En-Arrh. I'm sure you probably have already asked this. How come you have this guy on his display stand? The problem with the Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, unfortunately, though, and it had to be one of my favorite Batmans that McFarlane's team has put out, is that the ankles have started to develop looseness. More on this ankle than this angle here. So I've just got the figure currently on a display stand. We'll just take the figure off the stand for right now. Bring the other Batman from Zur-En-Arrh in so you guys can see the differences between the two. You know, again, like it's essentially just this color, just brightened a lot brighter. I mean, obviously the reds have now been swapped for oranges. The yellows are actually the thing that's the closest in color. The purples, though, are very different on scale. I've obviously got a much darker purple here for the gloves, a much brighter approach to the purple on the new Batman from Zur-En-Arrh. But essentially, like, everything on the figure is exactly the same. Capes are going to be the same. And even though, really, when you're looking at the two, the eyes look for a second like they might be sculpted differently, just keep in mind, again, like they would have just added a darker shadowing around the eyes. It is still my favorite Batman head sculpt, and I'm surprised to see that they have not yet used this head again with a future release for Batman. I thought we got one close enough with the Batman from Nightfall, but this one is still my favorite Batman head sculpt. It just looks the best from all the angles. Whether you like the brighter approach to the Batman Zur-En-Arrh from the Black Light edition, it's still one of the best, if not the best, head sculpts we've gotten for Batman. Of course, again, when it comes to the body, he has, again, those wrinkles, and he has, again, those little stitch marks. Of course, essentially, he's stitching together his own suit. So all those stitch lines that maybe don't stand out as much. I mean, obviously, when you're comparing it with the original from Batman Zur-En-Arrh, the stitches stood out a lot easier because, again, you were dealing with much darker plastic. Because the plastic is, again, so much brighter, it's kind of harder to make out the stitches that he has in the actual suit. But it's a good-looking figure overall. Flip the cape back so you can see. Even he has a completely differently designed utility belt as well, sporting some slightly smaller pockets. Looks like he's got also himself, like, it almost looks for a second like he's got himself a little clip there for a gun. A couple of smaller pockets there also as well. Just like, again, a really interesting, don't write this guy off just because, again, he's not a traditional-looking Batman. It's one of the best, again, I feel, that we've gotten from McFarlane's team. Now, of course, being that they are using the same body in this one as the one that we looked at before, his articulation is also going to be the exact same. Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, the Black Light edition, does have a ball joint, so it allows the head to rotate all the way around. The head can look down and can look up and back and forth as well. As for the arms do come out. I will say, though, about the figure is I've noticed a lot of the joints seem a little loose, especially like the ankles, for example. The hands, maybe not this hand, but this hand right over here is a little loose. Some of the tolerances, by only really just reusing this mold one more time, I noticed they've already started to get really loose on this figure. So again, like we've already looked at the head, the upper torso is going to be on a ball joint, a little bit lower than that, closer almost to his utility belt. The figure also has an abdomen ball joint there as well, so you can rotate that, of course, all the way around. Rotation in the arms is always present there in all these figures. So, of course, Batman Zur-En-Arrh does also have that as well. But, yeah, looseness, unfortunately, here for the shoulders. Not as much looseness when it comes to really the swivel in the bicep. But really loose, again, elbows. And this shouldn't really be the case. One thing I obviously can't overlook is the fact that right here you can see they've used sculpted plastic for the shoulders, the bicep. But yet when you get to the forearm, I'm guessing they probably would have molded this in purple plastic and did their best to try to match the yellow. But obviously there's a place where you can clearly see that one is a painted yellow, one is a plastic yellow. And especially having to paint yellow over top of a dark plastic like purple, you know the yellow is never going to come across as good as it does with the molded plastic next to it. The figure does have also, again, swiveling in the hands. Legs do split out, once again, on ratcheted joints. You can take the legs and move them forward, move them back. A swivel at the top of the thigh, double hinge on the knee. Articulation, well, no articulation really for the boots. Ankles, though, already starting to show looseness. You can see on both sides right here. Swiveling back and forth on the ankles, toe articulation always present on these figures. But it's again a shame that this is, from what I understand, the only other time we've gotten the Batman Zur-En-Arrh mold. And with this Batman already developing looseness in his ankles, it's a shame that of all the Batman figures, it has to be the one from Batman Zur-En-Arrh that has already started to develop looseness in his ankles. I do like this one. I obviously don't like it as much maybe as the original one that we got before. The charm, of course, of this one and the charm of course, the earlier looked at Scarecrow is the fact that they have the black light. The black light doesn't really honestly work as well as it maybe should because, of course, you're only getting a very small lamp source. I mean, again, like just to bring back around the display base here, you're only getting basically like this much of a lamp, this much of a spotlight shining in certain selected areas on Batman. Of course, you can always move them up and down, so, mileage may vary as to how much illumination you can actually get on the figure itself. Again, it's a good-looking mold. I'm glad to see, if anything, the mold has seen another light of day. I don't know if it's necessarily one that's really worth picking up, unless you're a big fan of getting kind of the specialty figures that McFarlane's been churning out, those variation figures. There's a charm, at least for that, in the sense that there's a figure that even if you don't plan to even really display the figure at all with his spotlights, even on the shelf, it's a nice variation to the original one we got before. When it comes prime time to be displaying the Blacklight Edition Batman from Zur-En-Arrh, you may not choose to have as much going on as what I have going on right now in Final Looks, just because, again, between the spotlight setup and the trading card standee, it makes the setup very busy looking. There's a lot going on. At one point, though, I did have the Blacklight Edition Infinite Frontier Scarecrow with all the things that you're seeing right now, but I ran into the problem that every collector runs into. The more figures you get, the less space you have on your shelf, and you may choose instead to sacrifice the spotlight setup in favor of just having the figure displayed on the shelf on his own. Problems also with these is the fact that obviously the batteries are going to be draining. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Having button cell batteries work fine and good, but the problem with it is, though, you can't always have them running. And with the angle also of the spotlights, in some cases you may even have to hinge the light or even take the light off completely to hit the switch, as sometimes that swiveling bracket does get in the way of things. I do wish that they could have found a means to have a button on the top of the spotlights rather than a switch on the back. It just would have made things a lot easier, especially if you have like friends, company coming over and they want to see your figure collection. They say, hey, how come that Batman's got spotlights all around him? And then you have to stop and try to find a way to get to the switch. You might just end up pulling off the spotlight in the process to turn it on to snap it back in place. But what do you guys think of these figures? Do you think that they're a novelty that you're not really all that interested in? Or do you kind of like the fun aspect of taking figures we've gotten from before and finding a new way to present them? I will say from certainly a standpoint of colors, there's definitely a new way to present them because they're a lot brighter than the earlier figures we looked at from before. Maybe a lot more with the Scarecrow, because the Scarecrow went from a very drastic coloring of more of the kind of bland ground colors, the browns and the beiges and stuff like that, to the brighter pinks, the blues and the greens. Batman from Zur-En-Arrh had to move a lot less in the way of color contrast. Basically, his colors are just the colors we got from before, as if they were colored with a highlighter instead. Big thank you once again, though, to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide the sample of the Batman from Zur-En-Arrh Blacklight Edition, which once again is an Entertainment Earth 2023 exclusive and a very limited run of 3,010 pieces. I wonder why they decided to go with 3,010. Rather than just the straight solid 3,000. Scarecrow, for example, also was an Entertainment Earth exclusive for 2023, but he was limited to 3,000 copies. Zur-En-Arrh beats him by 10. If you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly would like to stick around for more, well, we are wrapping up things, obviously, for the Zur-En-Arrh Blacklight Edition. There is definitely going to be some more McFarlane Toys, and definitely going to be some more DC Multiverse reviews coming your way, always in the pipeline, so make sure you're keeping your peepers peeled to this channel. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.